Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Again, thank you so much for being here tonight. And just would like to see a show of hands. Who is here at Products That Counts for the first time tonight? Wow, okay, thank you very much for being here. And then another show of hands. I'm sensing who is here who has moved to Seattle within the last year? Yeah, a lot of you. So look around. So there's a lot that have done that. So thank you again for being here. And so I want to introduce you to Products That Counts. Products That Counts was started by S.C. Modi, the woman in the picture here, a few years ago. And what she wanted to do was she had a desire to build out a community around people, product managers and innovators in the building, in the area of building emerging technologies and products that really make a difference. We're really lucky to get a series of speakers that share their unique perspective to the audience every month. And tonight we are video recording this, so just if you ask a question, ideally wait for us to come to you with a mic, or hold Jeff to be honest and have him repeat the question. And we wouldn't be here without our sponsors. We have three sponsors. I'll do. Amplitude is a company that helps us with actionable insights for products. mParticles is a customer data program that helps you to aggregate, basically profile data across channels. So it's mobile, web, and offline. And then before I go into a little bit more detail, I want to introduce you to Justin from Zillow, who has generously hosted this event tonight.
Thanks, Ann. Hi, everyone. I'm Justin. I lead our growth product development teams here at Zillow, and I'm super excited to hear. Thanks for coming. Hopefully you got a good view of the sunset before it got too dark outside. So actually, in following the pattern of show of hands, how many people are PMs, product program managers here? Nice. It's a good crew. Awesome. So I started my career in product management a long time ago. But one of the reasons why we're so excited to sponsor Products That Count, other than hearing from great speakers, is we are actually hiring. So if you're one of those people that raised your hand, you're a product manager, and you think, man, that view's awesome. I'd love to see that every day when I come to work. Your desk could be right along the window on one of the other floors. You can come talk to Joe or Alex or me over there. Joe and Alex, wave your hands. Hi. Or me, I'm happy to chat with you about that. We have a lot of PM roles open, including one in my org, that happy to talk about the details. And if you're interested, I'm happy to connect with the right people. So thanks, Ann. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And I also wanted to introduce you to Jeff Warren. So Jeff Warren and I, we both worked at Expedia, but we didn't really overlap until we started you started with Migo. So Jeff is a founder and CEO of Migo, which aggregates personal transportation. And I'll leave it there because Jeff can go a little bit more into detail. But that is his fifth startup, and he's also worked at Fortune 500 companies. When he was at Expedia, he was head of marketing for the Travelocity and What If products. What If is in Australia. And also he did I think you're pretty transformative for Expedia when it came to meta search and aggregation. When you think about that, that's the kayaks of the world and the others in that space. And then you were at Motorola for a stint. And we're really lucky to have you here tonight. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and let you take it away. Thank you very much for being here.
All right, is this one on? Good, fantastic. So thank you everyone for being here. I'm excited to be here and to talk about our journey at Migo, but it actually dovetails into journeys that we also had at Expedia. When I joined Expedia in 2011, my first 2 years there, I was the head of mobile product. And we, before creating a mobile team, had literally just been screen scraping the site and just re-representing the site up on a mobile phone, which, as you imagine, from a conversion perspective, wasn't very exciting at all. And what we realized at the time is that we had a lot of problems with what I'm going to talk about tonight, and that is paradox of choice. So I guess with no further ado, the title of this is Considering the Paradox of Choice in Mobility as a Service. MeeGo is a mobility as a service company, and so I'll talk a little bit about that and how we kind of ran into some of the same problems, but in a very different way, having to deal with very different solutions at MeeGo as compared to things that we had to deal with at Expedia. So first of all, who's heard of paradox of choice? Okay, that's actually fewer than I would expect. That's interesting. Okay, cool. Paradox of choice is a theory that a group of psychologists, led by one guy in particular out of New York, put forward in 2004 after doing some research. And the research around paradox of choice was initially based off of one major study they did. And what they did is they basically set up in a supermarket and they put out, in 1 week, 24 different types of jam. Right, and they had people come by and sample the jam and see what they wanted to do and what have you. And they had a lot of people come by and a lot of people taste the jam. And then some people bought the jam and they were all, okay, good. First part of the experiment was over. Then the next week, they cut down the number of choices of jam to 6. And a bunch of people came by and they sampled the jam, and 10 times as many people bought the jam. And so like, there's this really interesting paradox of choice where having too much choice may be a bad thing. And so it actually emerged as kind of a contra-capitalism movement in a certain way. It was basically saying, look, capitalism is all based off of having choice, an n number of choice at any point in time, right? But it turns out in the theory of the original psychologists that postulated the paradox of choice that too much choice can actually be a bad thing. And so what they found through then a lot of study after this is that this too much choice actually leads to this is for you to vote at the end, depression, B, paralysis of action, C, a lowered sense of satisfaction, or D, all of the above. So who thinks A, depression? Nobody, okay. Who thinks B, paralysis of action? Yeah. C, a lowered sense of satisfaction. And D, which of course this kind of gives it away, but D, it was all of the above. And they actually found that depending on the product category and depending on where paradox of choice was fitting into your life, it could result in any one of these very negative effects. And so the main psychologist actually went and did a bunch of TED Talks back in 2004, and he was saying like, look, I kind of like having the idea that there are 32 different pairs of jeans that I can choose from. But you know what? Like number 32 wasn't that much better than number like 31. I want to, the other 31 choices. I just want to go in and just tell me the pair of jeans that I want, like I had to do in the 1970s. I'm depressed by having too much choice. So let's just get rid of it. And, some people, as you can imagine, in America might take that a little too far. And so it was hotly debated in both, P&G, consumer products organizations for a long time, and then sociologists and people who deal with, whether or not people are living a happy life and what have you. And I want to relate this whole thing, just cut it all out and bring it right back down to software, because that's the industry that I'm in. And I think who here is in software in some way, shape, or form before I actually who is not in software in some way, shape, or form? Okay, good. 2 people. Okay, I'm going to bore you to tears. But to bring this to software, the thing that most software UX designers really begin to care about in this litany of negatives about paradox of choice, they really care about paralysis of action. And you could say lowered sense of satisfaction, because that might impact people who would be a repeat customer. But it's really the paralysis of choice that software engineers have gone after and UX designers have gone after as it pertains to paradox of choice. Now, look, it's not all bad. It's not all what everyone thought in 2004. This is the longest sentence in the entire presentation, I promise you. Okay, there were counter studies in 2013 and 14, and they actually found that while there were certain elements of the paradox of choice that were true, that there was actually a balance point. And the balance point they've kind of coined between the freedom of choice, where you have enough choice that you can kind of get excited about those choices, and the tyranny of choice, where there's just so much you cannot make up your mind. And so much, like 85 different types of chocolate that don't seem any different to a consumer, like, is not a good thing. But like, 3 or 4 different types of chocolate with clearly demarked differences, like 70% cacao and 35% cacao, can actually lead to heightened satisfaction. And there were a few interesting studies that they cited. One was something that Williams-Sonoma did. And they weren't aiming at paradox of choice, but Williams-Sonoma put out, and I think it was in 2006, but don't quote me on the date. They put out a bread maker, their first like Williams-Sonoma branded cool bread maker, right? And it was $295, and nobody bought it. It was just flailing. Like, people like making bread, and they like making bread at home. Why isn't anyone buying this thing, right? $295. So someone in the marketing department basically said, look, let's add some trim and put the same thing on the shelves for $435. And guess what? No one bought the $435 bread maker, but a ton of people started buying the $295 bread maker because they had a simple comparison point. And just having that simple comparison point got them through this sense that they had to compare, they had to know more, they had to go and do a bunch of research and then come back to Williams-Sonoma, which no one ever did, right? And so Williams-Sonoma actually had a case in point where the freedom of choice, or just having that comparison point, that reinforcing comparison point, even if it was generally a fallacy, worked really, really well. Another study that was cited, and around the same time, I think this was more in 2007, before the housing crisis really took hold, a U.S. home builder used to bring people into their model home in a development and just give them pages and pages of, these are all the choices you can pick. These are the 35 different, appliances that you can put in this house. And this is the 18 different types of tile. And you can match it with these 14 types of curtains and whatever. People would, on average, take something like 6 to 10 hours with a designer in the home to make some final decisions and just be done with it and then buy the home. They decided, let's just eliminate that. We're going to cut it down to like 4 options in every category, and we're going to show prices much more cleanly against the options, and we're going to try to cut this down. They cut the average session down to less than 2 hours, and their sales increased dramatically. And so it was another point that there's this kind of balancing point when you're really thinking about it. You want comparison, you want reinforcement through some means or another, but you do want some choice. And so that's kind of where paradox of choice is netting out today. It's about finding that balancing point with consumers between reinforcing that they're making a good choice, something you can be happy with, and then paralyzing them with a sheer number of options in front of you. And then you might say, look, I just saw this campaign by Starbucks, right, like a year ago, saying there are 80,000 different ways to order a Starbucks drink, right? When they put out their app, that's basically what they were saying. They're like, you have 80,000 configurations. That's marketing. When you go into the store, you've got like 10, and they're all different, kind of. Flat white is not different than a latte, trust me. But aside from that, right, they have like 10 in the store. So there's a difference between marketing, where they're kind of saying, hey, this is great, and then what you're confronted when you're in a line and having to get out quickly. So the risks presented by paradox of choice in action: low retention. If people are not satisfied, they typically will not come back. Negative conversion. If people can't make a decision, they simply will not convert. And we saw this in spades at Expedia, where we would just put up every single hotel option with you, and we were shrinking the size of the box more and more and putting more hotels above the fold, and just trying to get people to see the huge litany of choice in front of them in New York City. Let's present as much of the 1,145 hotels as we can in one shot. And conversion for Expedia just kind of dropped and dropped. And our number one competitor, Booking.com, kept on reporting that conversion was going up and up. Well, what were they doing? Well, they were doing a lot with what's down on the bottom. The last one was high concentration of consumers gravitating towards what they already know. So they won't embrace a new thing. They won't try a new thing. If there's so much choice and then their one thing is there, they're like, I'm not going to bother with the rest. They go to the one thing they know. So common tactics to address the negative implications of paradox of choice. First off is just simplicity of design, cleanliness of design, presenting and drawing the consumer's eyes to what is going to have the greatest impact on them at that moment in time, and not cluttering it with a million other things. Anticipatory intelligence. I'm going to talk about this one a little bit more in a moment, but this is something like, hey, you've come to our site 4 times. And we've noticed that each time you come to our site, you look at products of this style or this class, or you're always looking at stainless steel. So when you come in and you hit search, we're going to show you those products up top, the ones we think you're going to like. Abstraction, or layering data in layers and on top of a common model so people can kind of understand it better. This is where people build, and this is a bit of a self-promotion, sorry. This is where people will build products on top of maps, right? And you're like, okay, what's this widget thing? But if you put on a map, you're like, oh, that's the thing over on Pike and Pine. I get it, right? I know exactly what that is. So layering something onto something that people know and understand can sometimes help them just see and understand what it is better, faster. And then the next one's a little bit more abstract, but it's probably the one that we've played with the most, those of us who are in UX and product, and that is helping consumers choose instead of pick, meaning give them a reason to make a choice that they can feel good about, that can be reinforced to them that they've done the right thing for them or whoever they're exhibiting this behavior for, versus just throwing a bunch of stuff at them and making them just like, I'll take that one, because they end up not feeling good about picking versus choosing. Right? It's about the emotion you want the consumer to have at the moment. And the way that most of us do this are simple things like, if you go to TripAdvisor, what do you see? Like a bazillion reviews, right? Oh, that person, Bob, said things in his review that kind of felt like things that I might say about a hotel, so I trust that review, and I like Bob, and Bob gave it 5 stars, so I'm going there. Right? Reviews are self-reinforcing. Could be a count, number of people who enjoy this thing compared to this other thing that you're looking at. It could be a lot of different things that make people feel more like an expert, right? And this is also one of the things we always talked about in Travelland, and that is we want to help consumers feel like a travel expert, even if they travel. And the average consumer at Expedia traveled 1.8 times per year, right? But if we could just get them to the point where they felt like they were a travel expert, where they weren't getting ripped off, where they were actually getting a good deal, we knew we could actually have impact conversion in a good way. And then lastly, intuitive filters. So 2 quick case studies I'll talk about. First is Anticipatory Design. This is Spotify with an apology to my daughter who's been discovering Broadway tunes lately. What you can see here is, first off, when you go into Discovery and Spotify, they built a playlist just for you, and they tell you. And if you click into it, you kind of see, you can tell why those songs were chosen for you. They're things that you've listened to lately. And then just below, then a list of things that they're highlighting as recommendations for you. They have because you did blah, and in this case, it's listen to Andrew Lloyd Webber, my daughter, trust me. We're gonna also help you discover all these other things, and it's like the Sound of Music soundtrack and Wizard of Oz soundtrack and all this other cool stuff. But they're trying to like personalize this discovery experience to make it easy for you to click into a new thing and listen to a new thing, which, by the way, also typically includes a lot of newer music that is cheaper for them to license and to stream. And, like if you're just listening to The Who all the time or the Stones. Another example is choosing versus picking. Let's just see if I can work 2 at one time. So what we see here with Expedia is we see a lot of reinforcing points, like, hey, here's a rating. And the rating actually not only has a number, but has a qualifier. And this would say good or very good or whatever, depending on the qualifier. Second thing is, I can see things at a glance that reinforce to me that this might be something that I'm looking for. This is my personal list on Expedia. If you go to Expedia and you look at New York, you're not going to get this list. You're going to get a list that Expedia thinks is right for you, which is anticipatory as well. But here I see it's VIP access. They know I like booking VIP access hotels because as someone who worked at Expedia, I have free access to the VIP access program, which gives me upgrades and sometimes a bottle of wine. And then I've got 25 people booked in this property in the last 48 hours, right? There's a sense of urgency. It's called urgency messaging, right? It's a sense of urgency they contribute to, again, make you feel like, okay, there's something going on with this property. It's hot. I need to book this. And so these are all things that help you make a choice that you feel good about versus just randomly picking, like, on the picture of the hotel. I'll save my random story for later. Anyway. So, and then here's my shameless plug. The Expedia sort order, which is something we worked on a lot. This is the desktop site, or the website, the mobile site, or the mobile app. We worked a lot on really anticipating what people would want to look at and changing the sort order and the pictures and all sorts of other things, depending on what we thought was going to be most appropriate for the consumer. So mobility as a service. Right? So mobility as a service is my new job. Mobility as a service is basically getting anywhere from point A to point B using any method of transportation that you can secure through your smartphone in the world. So mobility as a service and paradox of choice. The first question I used to get when I was raising money for Migo back in 2016 was, wait a second, mobility service, isn't it just all about Uber and Lyft? Like, paradox of choice, buddy, what are you talking about? There are 2 choices, Uber, Lyft. Like, really? And so then, we started to do, before that, we did the real research. I started the process of educating a lot of potential investors on what the mobility as a service market really looked like. And what we found is, mobility as a service is not about, any two companies. It's not about any two categories like taxi. It's taxi, black car, rideshare, bikes, scooters, specialty, ADA, compliant rides. It's a bunch of different types of rides that help you get from A to B. When we were doing the research, we found 183 companies operating worldwide, either providing a service themselves directly or providing the technology for service providers to have a Uber-like experience or a Lyft-like experience. And what we also found, which was super exciting, was that 40% of the e-hailing options, 40% of the options that would get you from A to B were new as of 2016 or later, which is pretty cool, which meant the level of fragmentation in the mobility as a service market was increasing, not decreasing, because Uber was just kind of wiping out everyone else on the planet. It was just a really exciting and interesting space. But where it really matters is on the city-by-city view. And so when you look at mobility service on the city-by-city view, what we found was actually pretty surprising. The first thing we found was that almost every city, including secondary and tertiary cities, places like Baltimore, Memphis, and Seattle kind of in between, right? It's the 15th largest city in the US, and now it's really kind of a hallmark for mobility as a service. So it's now a tier 1 for us, but when we started this in 2016, it was more of a tier 2. Pronto was going out of business. Car2Go was just doing the little tiny smart cars, Reach now hadn't launched yet. And so even Seattle seemed like a secondary market at the time. But you can see Seattle had, 13 services in operation where you could hail a ride through a smartphone, right? Or secure a ride, some form of ride with a smartphone. New York City had 43. But all these small cities had, tons and tons of options. And the trend was very global, meaning I could look at any city outside of the US and there was actually more, particularly across Europe with scooters and with car share at the time. And across Europe, or across Asia, there were amazing things like there were 4 different companies operating in the area around Jakarta alone in Indonesia that allowed you to hail a scooter with a smartphone, get picked up and driven somewhere. It's pretty cool. There's a lot going on. Now, just to give you a sense of how this really actually looked, when we first implemented MiGo, we only put 4 partners on to build our pilot. And with a 2K view from the center of the city, with only 4 partners on, remember there are 13 that we could put on total, the city looks something kind of like that. So as soon as we saw that, we realized that we might have a paradox of choice issue. There was so much supply just with 4 providers, and again, there are 15 for us to work with in Seattle, that it was almost impossible to figure out what you wanted to take just by using a default view on Google Maps. This is just, if you fire up Google Maps on an iPhone, that's the construct you get, and then you overlay your data, that's what happens. It's pretty ugly. So I'm going to show you this view for a second. This is the latest version of MiGo. There's a bunch of things that are coming out in the next couple of weeks I'm excited about that I'm not going to get into tonight. But what you see here is we've got cars, groups, car share, bikes, scooters, and just still, if we didn't have Lyft and Uber both represented twice on this list, we only have about 7 partners fully implemented in Seattle. People like Flywheel, Zorro, Curb, Yellow Cab, and then, of course, Uber, Lyft, Public Transit, and Lime Bike. Now, this same exact view about 2 months ago when OFO and Spin were still in Seattle would also be kind of nutty. I would have zoomed it in even further. But I wanted to give you a representation of what the product looks like now. Now we're going to go back in time to when we discovered that we might have a paradox of choice issue. So this is the view of MiGo when it was just me and an engineer kind of playing around, trying to figure out what was going on in Seattle. So you have a couple providers. It's a little bit like the view you saw before. It's just the 4, and we realized if we just stick with the Google default view, like we're in trouble. And so the first thing we did is we hired on a UX pro from Disney. He had just done the UX design for Disney theme parks. If you want to understand a paradox of choice issue, try Disney theme parks. And with Disney, they also had some interesting challenges because they have to understand what kind of visitor you are on a given day. Like some people go with like small kids. Some people actually go in as adults. Some people just go by themselves. Some people go with a corporate group. And so they could be the same person. They're a different visitor. And so they spend a lot of time dealing with the sheer number of combinations of the ways people can get around Disney and how to present the data in a way in their theme parks app to make it useful. We started user testing when we were pre-alpha. So this was me and an engineer kind of messing around. And I think we incorporated in March. We were looking at this in June, right? And we didn't go into alpha until November. And so we tried about 4 major design modes. Some of the themes we were looking for is we wanted it to be at a glance. We wanted people to get that sense that of positive choice, of good choice, kind of at a glance. We wanted one-touch operation. So we wanted to make sure that people could actually secure a ride and figure out what they were doing with one hand. And so this is actually, I threw this in there for vanity. This is literally the very first version we just kind of cranked out while we were playing around in July of 2016. But the first thing we did is we discovered that a disambiguation or auto zoom feature really helped people with trust. Now this is going to go fast. I apologize. This was our first version. It was too fast, but I dug this out to just go back in time. And you can see we're kind of in the center of Seattle. And the first thing we do is we execute on a zoom. That zoom was designed to be the smallest radius possible to show you n number of providers and n number of rides. And as long as you fit into those parameters, that was fine. This one happened to be, our starter was, there had to be at least 3 providers visible and at least 7 vehicles total. So even if you only had like 5 vehicles, it would go a little bit further out. And that was our first zoom parameter. Our minimum was 100 meters, and you would be surprised in Seattle at how much we hit 100 meters, where you could, 100 meters in either direction of you, you had at least 3 providers and 7 different rides available to you to hail with a smartphone. But then the second thing that we did is go to the next slide. We added real-time density info to the partner hailing box next. So what this was intended to do, and at the moment it's very verbose, it's going to become graphical pretty soon, which is something I'm looking forward to. But we basically say, hey, you know what, it's 4 minutes to the closest ride, but a lot of people don't believe that when they hail, they will actually get the closest ride. They actually think it's, it's just going into a system and something's going to come out. And so we would tell people there are at least n number of cars within some framework, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever radius kind of made sense to them in that moment of time. And we're actually going kind of visual with this to make it more at a glance as we go. And so after that, we kind of thought we had it licked. We had pretty good responses. And then some smart person decided to launch dockless bikes in Seattle. And it broke every single algorithm that we put into the product. It just stopped working completely. And so what we did, this is what's called debug mode in MeeGo. Only people with a special code can get to it. And we're actually playing with this algorithm all the time. So how many different ride types, how many different ride providers can we show at any given time? And then we basically built a subcategory for bikes. So how can we change the zoom to only include a certain number of bikes, or even we began to kick bikes out of the algo. So even if the bikes were there, if they were more than like 100 meters away, you just wouldn't see them anymore. And we're still playing with it, to be honest. I should have started this whole talk with something that I wanted to say, and I kind of forgot to, and that was, if you're expecting this talk to be, we found this problem and we've solved it and everything is great now, you've come to the wrong talk. Okay, because what we did is we found this problem and we're still working on it a lot. And the market keeps on changing on us every single time we seem to get a bead on how to help people process what's in front of them and make a good choice and feel good about it. And so the last thing we added were fast filters. And with fast filters, they were just these colored circles at the bottom, which would show you what is on, right? And you tap it off, and we just had to make sure that the UX would respond, or the UI would respond very fast to just remove the category that might be causing you consternation at the moment. And for me, since I'm only using bikes like every once in a while, when I'm downtown, I usually just shut off bikes and then I turn them on when I really want to take a bike. Like when I came here tonight, electric line bike from Pioneer Square up to here is awesome. So anyway, and with fast filters, it's exactly what you think. If you're only interested in bikes, you can just shut off the ones you want, turn on the bikes. And we do see people using these quite a bit. And we've actually seen our conversion of people who use those features go up on an individual basis. So fast filters have been actually a big win for us. So anyway, that's actually the majority of my talk. I'll show you the product in action now today. I literally just took this on my way here tonight. So this is what downtown Seattle looks like in a mobility as a service market. And And once you put in your destination on Migo, you not only see the estimated time of arrival of most of the options around you, you also see the price. So you have price comparison between everything. You can look into, we added public transit, so you can look into public transit, see how long it'll take you to get somewhere. Then you can say, you know what, forget it, I'm doing a bike. So you hop onto here, click your bike, and then you realize you have no balance on your bike account, so you shut this down and you don't do the film anymore. So that's what I did. But anyway, so I guess the key takeaways from my perspective are, the paradox of choice is one of those things that's alive and well, but still being figured out and tested. And really what people have found as people have thought about paradox of choice as it pertains to software design over the years is that there's a balance, and you should strive by talking to your consumers, by talking to as many of them as you can, you should strive to find that balance point. What is the point at which the freedom of choice and that additional option actually is delightful, and where too much choice is paralyzing? I have a funny story about one of my investors who loved the idea of meta search and loved the idea of what we were doing at Migo, and so they invested, and then bikes got added right around the time that he asked his girlfriend to check it out, I guess. And so his girlfriend was using Migo. She's like, I can't use this. What is wrong? I cannot use this. And what she was doing is she was just bouncing around the map, just moving the map around and just seeing what was there. So the Zoom algorithm was never kicking in. So I got this frantic call from my investor, who's kind of a product person in his history, and he was saying, Jeff, we got to fix this. Like, no one's going to use this. It's horrible. Like, we're launching in a week. Like, what's going on? I'm like, hold on. What? Okay. Did you actually put in an address? No, we were just bouncing on the map. Okay. Put in an address. Okay. At least, then the Zoom algorithm kicked in and he was a little bit settled down. But it is a big issue for us. We hear from people a lot who don't use the product in exactly the way that we planned it. That it's hard to sometimes figure out what's new. We do get a lot of concentration of usage in what people know. We're still trying to overcome that. And then, you saw the data that we were putting out there. We have review data, we have the density data, but we still have a long way to go as a company that, no one's really heard of unless they've seen an ad on, Facebook, or they see some of our SEO work, or they see what we're doing in search ads. So like if you search for one of our competitors or even Lyft, you might see a Migo ad on the App Store. If you see us that way, like we're still kind of nobody from nowhere, right? And so we're working on trust and confidence in addition to trying to deal with paradox of choice. But I will say this, we have a lot of customers who start using Migo and they get it to compare Uber and Lyft prices. That's why they get it. But the ones who write to us and say, wow, this is amazing, are the people who discover something new. And so our whole goal has been to make sure they can discover something new and have the trust and confidence to try it. Now, sometimes that's when someone's out on Capitol Hill at 3 o'clock in the morning and everyone's in surge, and Yellow Cab is right there and is not in surge. Sometimes it happens that way. But a lot of times it's just because someone's really far away. And there's an option that's just closer. And so, we're discovering that the customers who come back again and again and again and are booking with us 4, 5, 6 times a month are the ones who discover something new. And so we're trying to bottle that and bake that into the product. So there are a lot of tools online if you're worried about paradox of choice in your own products. There's been a lot of research done since 2016 and a lot of things published about how to apply it to software. And they've really focused on the topics that I talked about below: simplicity of design, anticipatory intelligence, abstraction, and then helping consumers choose instead of pick. Filters can be an ugly word with some designers. I happen to still like them, but I think they have to be built the right way where they're super intuitive and not just kind of filters for the sake of filters. And that's about it. So I've got one shameless plug here, and that is, how are we doing for Migo? This is supposed to be our paradox of choice. This is my one about Migo slide. So what I love is this is our rides taken on Migo on a daily basis, and people are actually using all the services across the entire platform, with the exception of that little tiny green one in the bottom that people have used once in the last few months. But you see a concentration at the top. Clearly, Uber and Lyft are doing quite well on Migo. But you also see, some other in there. I will say the teal one, the third one down, is a bike company. The purple one is a taxi company. Sorry, that's a car share company. The yellow one is public transit. And so people are actually using the product across all the services that we provide. And so we're at least showing people something that they like. We've gotten a great response so far from our users. We're rated 146 in the travel category on the App Store. There's about 2 million travel apps in the App Store, so we're pretty happy about that. We've been rated as low as 64, but then we stopped pouring money into Apple to save some money, and we dropped a little bit. And we've got a 4.7 review. We're not gaming it whatsoever at all, and I've been actually really proud of that. So we've maintained a pretty high rating even as we've expanded our footprint. And then lastly, our retention stats are about 10x what I used to expect at Expedia. So for us, if we went out to week 8 and we were above 2.5% return on that week, like we were dancing in the streets. We were super happy. Here we're double digits all the way out to like week 11, and it just kind of holds at double digits all the way out on a cohort analysis basis. I'd be happy to talk about any of this in detail later, but I promised Anne that I wouldn't shamelessly plug Migo and talk over the paradox of choice discussion. So anyway. That is Migo. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And we definitely have time for questions.
Hi, thanks for the talk. I had 2 questions. The first question has 2 parts. So my first question is, you said you choose 3 providers and 7 cars. That's your default configuration. So my first question is that, why those 2 parameters? And it seems intuitive now, but why those 2 parameters? And then why those 2 values for those parameters?
So a lot of the early work we did, I'll actually just use this, a lot of the early work we did with the algo was based in Seattle. And we had implemented 5 providers. And every time we just left it at 5, it ended up just getting way too crowded. And a lot of it was because of Orange Cab. Orange Cab is listed on a provider on Migo called Curb, and they have a lot of deals. The reason Orange Cab is still in Seattle and has survived all this time is they have a lot of deals with hotels. And so you'll see like 6 Orange Cabs in a hotel, and it could be like 2K away, but that's like they're all clustered right there. And so it kept on breaking the algo when we left it at 5, because it's always including Orange Cab no matter what. So that's why we shrunk it from 5 to 3. Then as we moved into Portland, we started testing it out with the footprint in Portland. It turned out that 3 ended up being a really good number for us again, but that 7 was actually messing us up. So we actually cut it to 3 and 5. And then the zoom was going in tight enough you could kind of see yourself in a corner and get your bearings. We've looked at now making it dynamic as to whether or not you're in a place like Everett or Bellingham, where it really should be more like, 2 and 2, and then you're going to probably get probably a half a K spread, but we haven't gone that far with the algo yet. The reality is we're changing it all the time. We expose those controls to me and our head of product, a guy named Vince Chang, so that we could mess with it, and we do constantly. But the production version is still 3 and 7 because it worked in Seattle.
Thank you. My other question was that, and you may already have thought about this, but from a customer's point of view, from a user experience point of view, if somebody's going to go and, let's say, go to Migo, they're going to find a ride, let's say, car to go, whatever, and then they're going to go to that application, pay there, to discover they don't have credit. Wouldn't it be better, or have you considered Migo being kind of a transaction broker, or where you have credit, where you let people pay to your application, and then you seamlessly pay for whatever other applications underneath the covers?
Yep. So, and we do for most of the providers on Migo. It was really interesting data from our beta period. Our beta period we launched in April of 2016 to 200 users in Seattle. And then we increased it to 450 with a group in Portland about halfway through. And what we found is we had fully integrated Uber wouldn't partner with anyone who did what we did at the time. So with Lyft, Car2Go, Yellow Cab, we had fully integrated them into Migo, meaning you could go from search to hail to payment all within Migo without ever leaving the app. Everyone else was still a deep link to the partner app. And our conversion basically looked like Lyft, Car2Go, Yellow Cab, and everybody else. And so we actually delayed our launch by about 6 weeks to complete the integration of Curb, Zorro, Radio Cab, which is a really popular cab company in Portland, San Francisco Yellow Cab, and I think that's it. And so we launched with that, and in fact that lifted everybody. What we then do, though, is it takes us about an hour of development work and probably a day of testing to include a new partner as a search partner. Search meaning you can see them on Migo, but you have to deep link to their app to actually execute anything. And it takes us about a week to do full round trip, do a full complete hailing. And so when we added bikes, remember 3 bike companies launched simultaneously in Seattle. When we added bikes, we just put them on as search partners. And there's a unique thing about the bike companies in that they've never built out deep linking guides. And so when we actually fake a stateful session with the bike companies, if we log you in on Migo, it actually logs you off the Lime Bike app. And then when you go to the Lime Bike app, you restore your session there, and it cuts your credentials, cuts your token for the Migo app. And because of that byplay that can be really, really painful for a user, we just decided let's not do it. We're working with Lime to actually correct that, but we've left them on as a deep link until we figure that out. There's a different story with Car2Go, however. With Car2Go, I mentioned they were fairly deep link, like you could reserve a car in Migo, but you still had to pay or complete the ride in the Car2Go app. And the reason for that is with CarShare, I don't want to be the service provider, because in CarShare you can get into an accident. In fact, I've gotten in an accident. I was sitting in a Car2Go down on First Ave a while ago, hadn't even put the key in the ignition, and a pizza delivery guy clipped me. And so I'd wait for the police to show up and all this other stuff. But the Car2Go app had all like the buttons to press to call the safety line and like get everything processed and going with insurance. I don't want to deal with that yet, particularly as a Series C, now just recently Series A startup. So Car2Go is still a deep link.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I had a quick question about how you figured out what the correct stopping point is for when you've reduced choices to the right amount. Because let's say in the first Zoom level, you started off with, let's say, 100 bubbles. And then in the final Zoom level I counted, there were about 8 or 9. How did you decide 8 or 9 was the right stopping point and not stop at 15 or come down to 5?
It was completely through user testing, completely. And what it was actually kind of fun. There were 2 people in the user testing who had like a strong, visceral reaction to the Zoom algorithm in a positive way. So they would show, we would show them Migo, and then the Zoom algorithm would kick in, and they just go like, and they were like, wow, oh yeah. And like, it was like the clouds just opened up and they saw what was there, and they were kind of confused what they were looking at in the beginning. And it always came back to that same algorithm in Seattle for when people gave us the most positive reaction. Now, most people just said it, but there are 2 people that literally had like a visceral positive reaction when the Zoom kicked in. It was the pacing of the Zoom and the final level of the Zoom that we tested kind of the most with our test group. Yeah.
Thanks for chatting. I was curious what kind of like feedback mechanisms your team has to kind of judge progress, business, product metrics, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, so we look, let's see, a lot of different things. And I think we're measuring so much stuff to still figure out what are the most important things. So we definitely measure retention rates by cohort. We look at booking rates by cohort. We look at by cohort time for first booking, and then kind of one and done versus every user behavior. We have most of the app mapped out in Mixpanel, and we use that for our behavioral profiling. And we're constantly like looking deeply at the behavior of a good customer versus the behavior of someone who just kind of looks at Migo the first time and drops off. The KPIs we look at every week are kind of ride throughput, repeat user rates, retention rates, and then activation rates post-download. So kind of a lot of the standard KPIs, but then we're always looking a bit deeper in Mixpanel. Does that answer your question? Or okay, cool.
I had a question. First of all, thanks for being here. And
thank you for being here. Great.
So my question was, besides the paradox of choice, what would you say is the most important part when, building an app?
I will tell you what I think it is, and I'll tell you that I don't have enough data for us to know that I'm right. And it's a bit of a sexy topic today, so that's probably why I'm gravitating towards it. But I think one of our biggest problems is trust and confidence. I think it's the same thing with, like an Airbnb where, you're basically renting out someone's space in someone's house, and they have to trust that you're a good person, you're going to stay there, and you have to trust that they're not hiding in the closet to kill you when they're supposedly leave. So Airbnb did a ton of work around trust and confidence, from a very early stage to try and make it palatable for someone to stay in someone else's home. And a lot of it, revolved around looking really professional and all this other stuff. We're presenting consumers with a choice that's outside of, in the U.S. market, two brands that they know really, really well, Uber and Lyft, right? And we're saying, hey, this taxi company is right there, and, it's a brand new Prius, and it's actually less expensive because Uber and Lyft are in surge. Try it out. It's just as good. And we still see conversion, sticking with, you saw the graph, sticking with Uber and Lyft probably 50 to 60% of the time, right? And so trust and confidence to get people to try something that is not the brand they know is I think one of our biggest challenges, because they don't know anything about Migo, right? They're downloading Migo because there's something they see in it that they want. Bicycling.com did an article on us about 4 months ago, basically saying we were the best bike search app, in the country. And somebody's got a ton of big group of people who are just using it to do bikes. They did nothing but bikes. We have some users who do nothing but taxis, and then every once in a blue moon, they'll hail a Lyft, right? Because they're in a place where we don't have a taxi company, hooked up. Most of our customers hail Uber and Lyft or Uber Pool and Lyft Line. And to get them to into something else usually takes a fairly extraordinary circumstance, like massive surge, or they're literally someplace where Uber and Lyft are just not present, like North Bend. And so, getting to the point where people will see things more as equal because we feel they're equal because we put them on our platform feels to me like the biggest challenge. I can't guarantee you that's what it is, but that's what it feels like. And I don't think we've done enough user testing to say with certainty that it is the trust and confidence side of it, or if it's faith that people will give us their credit card information and we'll keep it safe if we transmit it to a small company from nowhere, that just might operate in one city, what have you. So we're still grasping at it a bit, but I think that's trust and confidence.
Great, thank you. Do we have any more questions? Great.
What's the marketing behind a four-letter name? Because I noticed there's a lot of four-letter names up there.
Yeah, interesting. As someone who was at Motorola when we launched the Razr, I would say I had no affinity for four-letter names or weird names. We wanted a name that spoke of motion, so Migo, and we wanted a name that sounded friendly but not silly. And the fact that amigo is, friend in Spanish, and that Spanish is one of those languages that is extremely internationally portable. I have a lot of friends. I used to work in Hong Kong a lot, in Singapore and Japan, and I actually would call them and say, hey, have you heard the word amigo? And they all had. Right. And so I knew it was a name that was internationally portable for us in a lot of areas of expansion that are very interesting to Migo. And I'll just give you, for instance, in Tokyo, there are more rides every day in Tokyo alone by taxi than in all of China every day, 22 million. Right. So the Asian markets are hugely interesting to us for a bunch of different reasons. And so I wanted to pick a name that was internationally portable, but also fairly friendly and also spoke of transportation. We started off as GoMigo, and literally about 2 weeks later, a company in India took the URL and launched, called GoMigo. So we just shortened it. And now, there's so many telecom companies around the world that have products named Amigo. That's what we're dealing with now. So we've registered the trademark in a bunch of places, but we still have ways to go.
Great, and we just have time for one more, and then we'll wrap up.
I like that.
All right, so back on the paradox of choice. When you look at a company like OfferUp and their conversion rates compared to an organization like yours where, they got to find a way home, How do you think OfferUp is doing with the paradox of choice?
Boy, it's funny. I have two views on this. So Arjen van Balen is one of our advisors. He's the former CTO at OfferUp, the founding CTO. And so if I look at OfferUp as a business from the outside and look at all the competitive forces around OfferUp, and I understand a bit about how they set up a two-sided marketplace in places that no one else was setting up operations in, fairly small territories, I'd say they're doing great. You talk to Arjen, they suck. I don't know where it is in the middle. I think it's never good enough for Arjen. And I don't know their exact conversion rates either. But as a product, in the market and the markets they've chosen to be in, I think they've done an outstanding job.
Great. And I think, Jeff, you'll be kind enough to stick around and take some questions.
Me too. One more shameless plug?
For paradox of choice?
No. So I don't want to take anything from our hosts from Zillow, but we just closed our Series A about a month and change ago, $9 million. It'll keep us going for a little while. We brought Enterprise, CarShare, Enterprise Holdings, and Hyundai into the fold, as well as a bunch of cool VCs. And we are also hiring. So if anyone's looking for a product job, I would love to know about it. And if you'd like to work for a small, scrappy startup with equity versus a giant, cool company with a great view, our view is of an alleyway. It's not the same, but we move fast. So I would love to know what your name is. So.
Great. Well, please join me in thanking Jeff for his time tonight. Great. Thank you. And I have some wrap-up items. First of all, Jeff, over there, actually I have a Products That Counts book, so I'm going to hand that to you, too. I left it over there. But also I want to thank everyone here. You have a choice of what to do in your evening, so just thank you very much for spending the night with us. Products That Counts, learning about Paradox of Choice. Next month in November, we have the Senior Vice President of Nordstrom coming, and he's going to be talking about how to design with a personal touch. And Nordstrom's known for that, but how do you evoke that Nordstrom experience into your e-commerce platform? I also want to tell you that you'll get a Net Promoter Score survey coming out. Please let us know how we're doing. Let us know where we can improve, what we've done right. So thank you for that. And also, we hope that you'll come again in November, and we use Seattle Friends, capital S, capital F, Seattle Friends, for 20% off. And then I want to just open up the mic before we wrap up for anyone who might have an announcement. If they're looking for a job, if they're doing a university project and they're looking for something like that. I'm new to Seattle. Does anyone want to get coffee? That sort of thing. Can I pick your brain about paradox of choice? Whatever it might be. Just ask you to be concise or brief. But definitely this is your mic. I'll give a minute or two or a few seconds. Okay. Sometimes Seattle's a shy group. Sometimes I have to key this up a little bit ahead of the evening so you have the talk to think about what you're going to say. So that's on me. So again, we have the Zillow recruiting team in the back, and they would love to speak to you. Zillow is hiring and just hiring. It's fantastic. We live in Seattle. There's so many great choices. And you can't really go wrong. And there's still some food in the other room, and we have the room for about 25, 30 more minutes. And then we just ask that you help us keep it clean when you leave. But again, thank you for your time tonight. And see you again. Bye.